Between 1932 and 1962, over 73,000 prisoners endured the brutal Vorkuta Gulag, north of the Arctic Circle, facing starvation, constant daylight, and temperatures of -30 degrees. The camp was merciless and remote, but for those who survived, life continued amidst unimaginable suffering. Here's what life was really like inside the worst Soviet Gulag camp. Okay, so if you're here a lot, you know I ask for likes and subscribes, but seriously, where are you guys? Comment your location and time. Sometimes I see someone from California listening at 3 p.m. and I'm like, are you napping? All right, Soviet gulags tonight. But wait, are you comfortable? No, really? Check. Pillows, blankets, the whole deal. Where we're going, you'll want to be settled. You jolt awake to complete darkness. For a second, just one merciful second, you forget where you are. Your mind reaches for the comfort of your old bed, your old life. Then the stench hits you, the sour smell of unwashed bodies packed too tightly together, the sharp tang of urine, the musty odour of wet concrete that never dries. You're in a cattle car. You've been in this cattle car for, what, 6 days? 7? You've lost count. The rhythmic clacking of train wheels on track has become the heartbeat of your existence. We're stopping, someone whispers in the darkness. The car falls silent. All 80 of you, crammed into a space meant for livestock, hold your breath collectively. The train groans and shudders to a halt. Then comes the sound you've been dreading, metal scraping against metal as the door slides open. Arctic air rushes in like a slap. It's so cold it burns your lungs. The darkness outside is broken only by the harsh beams of searchlights sweeping across the fresh snow. Guards with rifles stand in silhouette against the white backdrop. Behind them looms a sight that will haunt you for years, if you live that long. "Welcome to Vorkuta," a guard says flatly. "Your new home." The train hadn't prepared you for this. Nothing could. You're about 100 miles north of the Arctic Circle, in a place so remote it barely existed before the Soviet authorities decided it was the perfect location to exile those they wanted to disappear. "Move!" A guard shoves the prisoner next to you with the butt of his rifle. "Everyone out!" You stumble down onto the snow. Your city shoes, the ones you were wearing when they arrested you 3 weeks ago, provide no protection against the cold. Within seconds, you can't feel your toes. Unlike your warm bed right now, where your feet are probably toasty under the blankets, here the cold is an immediate threat to your survival. "You know what's wild?" the man beside you mutters. Stalin calls this correction, like we're all just slightly off course and need a little nudge. A rifle butt slams into his back. He drops to his knees with a muffled cry. "No talking," the guard barks. Line up now." You join the ragged line of new arrivals. Many are political prisoners like yourself, teachers, engineers, writers, ordinary workers who made the fatal mistake of speaking too freely. Some are actual criminals. A few are foreign prisoners of war. All of you are now the same, property of the state, to be used until you break. The processing begins in a freezing wooden building with peeling paint. Inside, a bored official sits behind a desk covered with papers. "Name," he says without looking up. You tell him. "Crime." "I didn't," you start, but he cuts you off. "Article 58, he says, already writing it down. The infamous Article 58, counter-revolutionary activities. It could mean anything from telling a joke about Stalin to being related to someone who told a joke about Stalin. "Strip," another official commands. You hesitate. "I said strip." He raises his hand as if to strike you. In the bitter cold of the unheated room, you remove your clothes. They take everything. Your watch, your belt, your wedding ring. The few personal possessions you managed to keep during your journey are confiscated. You will never see them again. I've been researching this stuff for years, I should mention, and the most shocking part was how systematic the dehumanization was. Like, they didn't just take your stuff, they took your name, replaced it with a number. After they shave your head, ostensibly for hygiene, but really as one more way to strip your identity, you're given your camp uniform, thin cotton pants, a jacket that's seen better days, a pair of foot cloths, and crude wooden shoes that won't last a month in the mines. The foot cloths are supposed to be wrapped around your feet before putting on the shoes. Nobody shows you how to do this properly. You'll learn later, after your first blisters form and become infected. Next, the official calls, and you're pushed toward another room. Outside again, you join the other new arrivals. A guard addresses the group. Listen carefully. You are here to work. You work, you eat. You don't work, you don't eat. The sooner you accept this, the longer you'll live. He explains the rules. Wake up is at 5 a.m. Roll call at 5:30. Work begins at 6 and continues until the quota is met, usually 14 to 16 hours. Speaking to guards without permission is prohibited. Attempting to escape is punishable by death. Any questions, he asks? Not expecting any. A brave soul raises his hand. How long until we get male privileges? The guard laughs. 6 months good behaviour, 2 letters a year after that. 6 months. You think of your family, who probably don't even know where you are. Will they still be waiting when, if, you can write to them? Now move to the barracks. You march through the camp. The searchlights illuminate a nightmarish landscape. Wooden barracks stretch in neat rows, surrounded by barbed wire fences and watchtowers. Beyond the fences, nothing but snow and darkness. In the distance, you can make out the silhouette of a coal mine, the reason this camp exists. See those? An older prisoner points to the watchtowers. Triple shifts up there. Guards hate it. Cold drives them crazy too, but they got better clothes. And those? He gestures to the barbed wire. Don't even think about it. Wolves out there would get you before you made 10 miles anyway. Wolves, you ask? Nature's guards, he says with a bitter smile. The perfect setup. Prison walls of ice and hungry predators. The comrades in Moscow thought of everything. You're assigned to Barracks 12, a long wooden structure that looks like it might collapse under the weight of the snow on its roof. Inside, it's barely warmer than outside. Triple bunks line the walls, packed so tightly that there's only a narrow aisle down the middle. Top bunk, a prisoner tells you, pointing upward. Lucky you. It takes a moment to realise why the top bunk is considered lucky. Heat rises, so the top bunks are marginally warmer. But more importantly, prisoners often relieve themselves during the night, and the urine drips down to the lower bunks. I've read accounts of survivors, I note. And they all talk about those little calculations. What bunk to take, how to wrap your food so it wouldn't get stolen, who to befriend. Your entire day becomes this endless series of survival decisions. You climb onto your assigned bunk. The mattress is a thin sack stuffed with straw that does little to cushion the wooden slats beneath. Your blanket is threadbare and stained. There's no pillow. A bell rings somewhere outside. Dinner, someone calls, and there's a sudden scramble of movement. You follow the crowd to the mess hall, another wooden building that smells of boiled cabbage and unwashed bodies. You're given a crude metal bowl and a piece of bread. The soup in the serving pot is mostly water with a few vegetable scraps floating in it. 140 grams, the server says, handing you a piece of black bread. You'll quickly learn that this daily bread ration, about the size of your fist, is the most precious commodity in camp. Men have been killed for less. First day, huh? An older prisoner sits next to you. His face is gaunt, his eyes deep set. Eat slow, make it last, and keep your bread with you at all times. You notice he has his piece of bread tucked inside his jacket, close to his chest. They call this pika, he explains, gesturing to the food. Ration, not enough to live on, too much to die quickly. Perfect balance. You take a bite of the bread. It's dense, sour, and filled with things you'd rather not identify, but it's food. I'm Mikhail, the man says. Political? You nod. Me too. Professor of literature made a joke about the wrong poem. He shrugs. 5 years. You? 10, you say, the reality of that sentence still not fully registering. Mikhail's face reveals nothing. Well, nobody serves their full term anyway. They let people out early, you ask hopefully. He laughs, but there's no humour in it. No, most don't last 3 winters. After dinner, you return to the barracks. The exhaustion of the journey and the shock of arrival finally catch up with you. You climb onto your bunk and try to get comfortable on the hard surface. Hey, I break in. Imagine for a second how different this is from where you are right now. Your soft bed, warm room, no wolves outside. Just that contrast is kind of mind-blowing. Around you, men are preparing for sleep. Some pray quietly, others stare silently at the ceiling. A few cry softly. You hear coughing, so much coughing. Later, you'll learn that tuberculosis runs rampant through the camp. First day's the worst, someone says from the bunk below. Actually, no. First day in the mine is the worst, but today's bad too. What should I expect tomorrow, you ask. They'll assign you a work detail. Pray it's not the deep mines. Surface work is better, cold as hell, but better than the tunnels. Sleep comes fitfully. The barracks never fully quiet. There's always someone snoring, coughing, talking in their sleep, or getting up to use the single bucket in the corner that serves as a toilet for 50 men. Before dawn, a bell rings harshly, followed by shouts from the guards. Podyom, get up now! You're already awake. You barely slept. But others are slower to respond, and guards enter the barracks, striking bunks with batons. Roll call in 5 minutes. Anyone not outside gets no breakfast. There's a frantic scramble as men pull on their thin jackets and shoes. Nobody wants to miss breakfast, meagre as it is. Outside, it's still dark. The temperature has dropped even further during the night. You can see your breath crystallizing in front of your face. The prisoners form lines, shivering in the pre-dawn air. Guards move down the lines, counting. Then comes the waiting, standing perfectly still in formation while officials check the numbers against their records. One missing prisoner means nobody moves until they're found, alive or dead. All present, a guard finally announces. You march to the mess hall for breakfast, a watery porridge and more of the precious black bread. Just as you finish eating, an official enters and reads from a list. New arrivals, work assignments, barracks 12, prisoners report to administration building immediately following breakfast. Your stomach tightens. This is it. The moment that might determine whether you survive your first year at Vorkuta. In the administration building, a camp official sits behind a desk piled with papers. He doesn't look up as you enter. Name and number, he demands. You give them. He consults his list. Mine 7, coal extraction. Report to Foreman Petrov at the mine entrance. 0600 hours. Your heart sinks. You've been assigned to the deep mines, the most dangerous work in the camp. But you dare not protest. As you exit the building, you see the sun beginning to rise over the camp, a weak, watery light that does little to dispel the gloom. The silhouette of Mine 7 looms in the distance, its headframe stark against the grey sky. A prisoner passing by notices your gaze. First day in the mines. A. Word of advice. Keep your head down. Do what they tell you and don't make friends too quickly. Why not, you ask? He gives you a grim smile, because in that hole most don't last the month. No point getting attached. You stare at the mine entrance, a black mouth ready to swallow you whole. The journey that began with your arrest has led you here, to the frozen edge of the Soviet Empire, where men vanish into the earth and sometimes never return. The bell rings again, signalling the end of breakfast. It's time to report for your first shift in the mines of Vorkuta, a shift that might well last the rest of your life. So that's arrival day, I say quietly. Just the first of thousands for those who survived. The stories get wilder from here. The survival strategies, the social hierarchies that developed. We'll get into all that. But for now, just take a moment. Feel your warm bed, your safe room. And maybe spare a thought for the millions who never made it home from places like Vorkuta. The next morning would bring your first real test, your first shift in the coal mines of the Arctic Circle, but that's a story for another time. The 5 a.m. bell rips through your sleep like a rusty knife. 1 second of darkness, the next, chaos. Men around you leap from bunks, fumble for clothes, crash into each other in the narrow aisle. The veterans are already dressed, having slept in most of their clothes to combat the cold. Move it, a prisoner, not a guard, barks orders. He's the barracks elder, responsible for making sure everyone makes roll call. If someone's late, everyone suffers. You've been in Vorkuta 3 days now, long enough to understand the routine, not long enough to master it. The simplest tasks, wrapping footcloths correctly, gulping down breakfast fast enough, finding your place in line, are still clumsy struggles. Outside, it's pitch black. The sky above Vorkuta in winter never fully brightens, just a few hours of grey twilight around noon before darkness reclaims the land. The temperature gauge near the mess hall reads -38 degrees. Your nostrils freeze together when you breathe in too deeply. Hey, history nerd moment here, I break in. The polar night in Vorkuta lasted from December 17th to 27, 10 days of complete darkness, but the twilight periods before and after meant almost 2 months of functional darkness. Imagine that, going to work in the dark, working underground all day, then coming back up to more dark. Roll call is the first gauntlet of the day. 50 men from your barracks stand in 5 rows of 10, perfectly straight despite the wind cutting through your thin clothes. The guards count, recount, check their lists. A missing prisoner means a camp-wide lockdown until they're found. Being late means punishment for everyone. The count takes 20 minutes in the biting cold. Men around you stomp their feet and blow into their hands, trying to maintain circulation. The veterans know better than to complain. You're learning quickly. Barracks 12, all present, the guard finally shouts. Breakfast is next, the most important meal, though calling it a meal stretches the definition. The mess hall is marginally warmer than outside. You're given a metal bowl with watery porridge, a cup of hot water they call tea, and your daily bread ration. Eat your bread slow, Mikhail advises, sliding onto the bench beside you. Break off small pieces, make it last. The hunger will hit worst around 2 o'clock. You try to follow his advice, but the hunger is already gnawing at your stomach. 3 days in Vorkuta, and you're always hungry, always cold, always tired. This is your life now. How was your first mine shift? Mikhail asks, keeping his voice low. Brutal, you admit. I don't know how anyone survives it. You adapt, he says simply, or you don't. Your first day in Mine 7 had been worse than you imagined, descending in a rickety cage elevator, the darkness absolute except for a few oil lamps, the air thick with coal dust that coated your lungs, working in a cramped seam with a pickaxe, your back screaming in pain after the first hour, and 11 more hours to go. Listen, Mikhail interrupts your thoughts. You need to figure out your survival strategy fast. Everyone who makes it past the first month has one. What's yours? You ask. He hesitates, then taps his temple. I'm the barrack storyteller. After dinner, men give me a bit of their bread to tell stories, tales from Moscow, adventures from books, anything to make them forget where we are for a few minutes. Find what you're good at. Become necessary. The bell rings, signalling the end of breakfast. Time to line up for work assignment. The foreman, Petrov, is a thick-necked man with dead eyes. He was once a prisoner himself, now upgraded to trustee status. He divides the workers into brigades and assigns daily quotas. Your brigade has 20 men and a quota of 15 tons of coal. Same as yesterday, Petrov growls, which you failed to meet, so today you work until you hit 15 tons. No coming up until then. The walk to the mine entrance is just far enough to freeze your extremities. Guards herd you along, rifles at the ready. They don't worry much about escape attempts in winter. The cold is a more effective deterrent than bullets. Hold up, I interject. Let's talk about those quotas for a sec. They were designed to be nearly impossible to meet. That was intentional. See, if you didn't meet quota, they could cut your food ration. Less food meant less strength to work. Less strength meant falling further behind on quotas, and down you'd spiral. At the mine entrance, you collect your tools, a pickaxe with a loose head, a shovel with a splintered handle. No gloves, no helmets, no safety equipment of any kind. The state needs coal, not miners. The cage elevator creaks and sways as it carries you down. Some men cross themselves, others stare blankly ahead. The veteran miners have a dead look in their eyes you're starting to recognize. It's the look of men who have accepted their fate. The shaft opens into a main tunnel with smaller tunnels branching off. Your brigade heads down one of these offshoots, stooping to avoid hitting your heads on the low ceiling. The air gets thicker, hotter, harder to breathe the further you go. Your work area is a coal seam barely tall enough to sit up in. You'll spend the next 12 to 16 hours lying on your side, picking at the face of the seam, filling carts with coal. The dust coats everything, your skin, your clothes, the inside of your lungs. Within an hour, you're coughing up black phlegm. Pace yourself, whispers the miner next to you, an older Ukrainian named Taras. Don't try to work too fast at the start. Save your strength. But pacing yourself is luxury when the quota looms. The brigade leader keeps shouting updates. How many tons extracted? How many hours left in the shift? How far behind you're falling? By noon, your arms feel like lead. Your back spasms when you try to shift position. The water in your canteen is gone and thirst burns your throat. Break, calls the brigade leader. 5 minutes. Men slump against the tunnel walls, gasping for the thick air. You notice Taras pull something from inside his jacket, a small cloth bundle. He unwraps it carefully to reveal a piece of saved bread. You have to keep something back, he tells you, seeing your gaze. Never eat all your bread at breakfast. The work will kill you otherwise. After the break, the labour resumes. The hours blur together in a haze of pain and exhaustion. The air gets worse as the day progresses, the dust thicker, the oxygen thinner. Men start making mistakes. A cart derails. Someone drops a pickaxe on his foot. Arguments break out over trivial things. We're at 13 tons, the brigade leader shouts. 2 more to go. Push harder. It's well past the normal end of shift. Through the grapevine, word comes down that the other brigades have already gone up. Only yours remains, still short of quota. I knew a guy, I pause, who told me about something they called the final hour. When you'd been working for 14-15 hours straight and you were so exhausted you started hallucinating, but you still had to keep going. He said that's when accidents happened most, when men just broke. Midnight comes and goes. Men are barely functioning, moving like automatons. Finally, at nearly 1 a.m., the brigade leader announces you've hit 15 tons. The relief is palpable, but short-lived. You still have to climb out of the mine, walk back to camp, get through evening roll call, and find some food before you can rest. And wake up is still at 5 a.m. The return journey is a death march. Men stumble and fall in the snow, only to be roughly hauled to their feet by guards. At camp, the kitchen is closed, but your brigade is given cold porridge and bread saved from dinner, a small mercy for meeting quota, however late. Roll call is a blur. You're so tired you can barely stand. When finally allowed to return to the barracks, you collapse onto your bunk without removing your clothes or boots. Too exhausted even to eat your bread, you slip immediately into unconsciousness. The next day is the same, and the next and the next. You want to know how people survived this, I ask. They became experts at tiny efficiencies, how to hold the pickaxe to save energy, which guards might look the other way if you needed a minute's rest, which jobs in the mine were marginally less brutal. By your second week, you're starting to understand the unwritten rules of Vorkuta, the complex hierarchy among prisoners, the dangerous politics of the barracks, the black market that exists despite the guards' best efforts to stamp it out. Mikhail explains the prisoner pecking order one evening after dinner. At the top are the trustees, prisoners who work for the administration, guards, foremen, clerks. They get better food, better housing, lighter work. Most are criminals, not politicals. Below them, he continues, are the skilled workers, engineers, mechanics, medical staff, then common labourers like us. At the bottom are the goners, men too weak to work much longer. Everyone can tell who they are, skin like paper stretched over bones, eyes sunk deep. The walking dead. You've seen these men, skeletal figures shuffling around camp, gradually fading away until one day they simply don't appear at roll call. Nobody asks what happened to them. The trick, Mikhail says, is to find ways to move up, become skilled at something, make yourself valuable. Easier said than done, but you watch and learn. The man who repairs boots gets extra bread. The barber receives small favours. The medical orderly, though work to exhaustion, at least works indoors. Food becomes your obsession. Every calorie is precious. Men talk about meals from their past lives with religious reverence. Arguments break out over the memory of a recipe. Dreams are filled not with freedom, but with feasts. You know what's messed up, I interject. In some camps they actually had decent food on paper. The problem was it never reached the prisoners. Camp officials would sell it on the black market, or guards would take the best portions. By the time it reached the mess hall, that meat stew in the official records was just water with a few scraps of gristle. The camp operates on an intricate barter system. Cigarettes are currency. A pack can buy a repair to your boots. 2 packs might get you assigned to an easier work detail for a day. Extra bread can purchase almost anything. Information, protection, favours, theft is the unforgivable crime among prisoners. Take another man's bread and you might not wake up the next morning. The guards don't interfere with prisoner justice in such matters. One less mouth to feed. You witness your first bread theft on your 3rd week. A new arrival, desperate with hunger, snatches a piece from an older prisoner's hand and runs. He doesn't get far. A dozen men tackle him, drag him behind the barracks. He returns hours later, face unrecognizable, crawling on hands and knees. He disappears the next day. Nobody asks questions. The bread ration was sacred, I explain, like beyond sacred. Men would sleep with their daily portion tucked against their bodies. They'd rather lose a finger than their bread. There was a saying in the camps, "He who steals bread steals life." Weather is another constant enemy. The cold is relentless, cutting through your thin clothing like knives. Frostbite claims fingers, toes, ears, noses. The medical station is filled with men having blackened extremities amputated. Keep moving, veterans advise. Never stand still outside. Wiggle your toes constantly. Put paper inside your clothes for insulation. You learn to sleep with your boots under your head to prevent them freezing solid overnight. You learn to urinate on your hands to warm them in an emergency. You learn that failing to brush the snow from your eyebrows can lead to them freezing to your skin. But even as the physical challenges mount, it's the psychological torture that proves most insidious. The constant surveillance, the arbitrary punishment, the knowledge that your 10-year sentence might as well be forever, the loss of your name, your identity, your past life. I saw a report from a camp doctor once, I mention, who said the psychological breaking point for most prisoners came between month 2 and 3. That's when the reality fully set in. This wasn't temporary, this was their life now. One evening, as you sit on your bunk too exhausted to sleep, Taurus approaches. "You're losing weight too fast," he says bluntly. "You won't last the winter at this rate." "What can I do?" you ask. "The work is impossible. The food is nothing." "There are options," he says carefully. "Desperate ones," he explains in hushed tones. Some prisoners deliberately injure themselves to get medical leave. Cut off a finger, drink kerosene, reopen healing wounds. The hospital, though basic, is still better than the mines. "But be careful," he warns. "They're wise to most tricks. Get caught faking, and it's the punishment cells. Nobody survives those in winter." The punishment cells are legendary, unheated concrete boxes where prisoners are kept in underwear with reduced rations. 3 days is considered a death sentence in winter. "I'm not that desperate," you tell him. "Not yet. You will be," he replies. "We all reach that point, eventually." But there are other survival strategies. Some prisoners form tight bonds, sharing resources and protecting each other. These small families often last longer than loners. Mikhail has invited you to join his circle. Him, Taras, and a young Estonian named Rain. They pool their resources, share information, watch each other's backs. It's not friendship exactly. Emotional attachment is a luxury few can afford, but it's a practical alliance. During bad times, Mikhail explains, one of us might get a package or find an extra piece of bread. We share. During the worst times, we keep each other from giving up. The social bonds were critical, I point out. Guards tried to break them up because they knew isolated prisoners died faster, but humans naturally form communities, even in the worst places, maybe especially in the worst places. The camp has an underground information network that moves with surprising speed. News from other barracks, other mines, even other camps hundreds of miles away somehow filters through. Prisoners whisper about changes in Moscow, about international politics, about rumors of amnesty or worsening conditions. Most of it is fantasy, but hope is as necessary as bread. You quickly learn which guards can be bribed, which are sadists to be avoided, which might show small mercies if approached correctly. There's Stepan, who looks the other way if you take a minute's rest. There's Dmitri, who will beat you for the same offence. There's Igor, who might slip you an extra bread crust if you fix his boot or compose a letter to his girlfriend. Guards weren't universally monsters, I note. Some were just ordinary guys doing a job, trying to survive themselves, not defending the system. It was evil through and through, but individual guards sometimes showed humanity. Others, though, well, power attracts certain types. By your second month, you've developed your own survival routines. You save a third of your morning bread for the mine. You wrap your feet in paper beneath your footcloths. You've learned to work efficiently enough to avoid the worst exhaustion while still contributing your share to the brigade's quota. You've also learned the strange seasonal rhythms of Vorkuta. Winter is the time of death. Cold, darkness, and despair claim the weak. Spring brings mud so deep men drown in it. Summer brings mosquitoes in biblical swarms. Autumn is a brief respite before winter's return. One morning, Mikhail doesn't rise at the wake-up bell. You shake him, but he doesn't respond. His skin is hot to the touch, his breathing rapid and shallow. "Medical," you shout, and the barracks elder comes running. "Lung fever," he pronounces after a quick examination. "Get him to the infirmary." You and Taras carry Mikhail through the snow to the medical station, a slightly larger barracks with a red cross painted on the door. Inside, the smell of disinfectant barely covers the stench of infection and death. A prisoner doctor examines Mikhail briefly. "Pneumonia. Not surprising with the mine dust. We'll keep him." "Will he survive?" you ask. The doctor looks at you with tired eyes. "Depends on how strong he is and how valuable to the administration. Engineers get antibiotics, regular miners get rest and aspirin. You leave Mikhail on a narrow cot, knowing you might never see him again. The survival math is simple and brutal. Men who can't work don't eat. Men who don't eat don't live. But life in Vorkuta teaches you to continue regardless. You return to your barracks, collect your tools, and head to the mines. The quotas don't care about your sick friend. The coal must flow. That night, lying on your bunk, you realize something has changed. 2 months ago, you were horrified by everything. The conditions, the cruelty, the casual brutality. Now you accept it as normal. You step over a dead man on your way to breakfast without breaking stride. You barter and scheme for extra crumbs of bread. You've learned to survive in a world designed to kill you. "That's the thing about humans," I say softly. "We adapt, even to hell, maybe especially to hell. The price of that adaptation is losing pieces of your humanity, one small compromise at a time. The morning bell will ring at 5 a.m., another day of coal dust and hunger and cold. Another day of calculated survival, another day of Vorkuta. But for now, in the darkness of the barracks, surrounded by the snores and whimpers of 50 broken men, you allow yourself one moment of weakness. You think of home, of freedom, of a world beyond barbed wire. Then you push those thoughts away. In Vorkuta, hope is a luxury that weighs you down, and you've learned to travel light. A month passes, then 2. You've survived your first 60 days at Vorkuta, which the old-timers tell you is something of a miracle. Your body has changed, ribs visible through your skin, face gaunt, hands calloused and scarred, but you're still breathing, still moving, still mining. You've become something of an expert on coal. Not by choice. Nobody arrives at Vorkuta dreaming of becoming a miner, but 14 hours a day, 6 days a week spent hacking at coal seams teaches you things whether you want to learn them or not. "Ready for another thrilling day in the mines?" Taras asks, as you lace up your boots before dawn. His humour is dark as the tunnels you work in, but it's one of the few things keeping you both sane. "Can't wait," you reply. "The ambience, the cuisine, the delightful company of our dear foreman Petrov." Mikhail survived his bout with pneumonia, though he returned from the infirmary even thinner, weaker. The administration reassigned him to lighter work sorting coal above ground. A blessing and curse. Less dangerous, but also more exposed to the elements. I spent months researching these mines, I interject. The coal seams at Vorkuta were some of the richest in Russia, but also some of the most dangerous, hard to access, prone to collapses, full of methane pockets. In a normal country, they might have waited for better technology. But Stalin didn't care about miner safety. He needed coal for industrialization, and prisoners were disposable. The walk to Mine 7 has become so routine you could do it blindfolded, past the administration building, through the second checkpoint, along the path stomped in snow by thousands of feet. The head frame of the mine rises above you, a gallows against the dark sky. You've learned to read the signs at the mine entrance. If the cage operator looks nervous, it means there's been an accident below. If extra guards are posted, it means someone tried to escape or sabotage operations. Today, everything looks normal, which in Vorkuta means merely terrible, instead of catastrophic. The descent into the mine is the moment most prisoners dread. The cage, really just an open metal platform with minimal railings, drops so fast your stomach lurches. The darkness swallows you immediately, with only a few weak lamps marking the way. The air changes, becoming heavy with coal dust and the smell of human sweat. Going down, the operator calls, and the platform lurches into motion. As you descend, Rain, the young Estonian who's become part of your small circle, leans over. Heard anything about the new quotas? You shake your head. The administration changes work requirements frequently, almost always increasing them. It's a way to extract maximum labour while justifying reduced rations when prisoners inevitably fail to meet impossible targets. Word is they're upping ours to 18 tons, he whispers. Brigade 4 got the news yesterday. 18 tons. Your group has been struggling to hit 15. 18 would mean even longer shifts, even less rest. The cage shudders to a stop at the bottom, nearly 1,000 feet below the surface. Here the main tunnel branches in multiple directions, each leading to different work areas. Electric lights, bare bulbs hanging from wires, provide minimal illumination. The air is thick enough to chew. Petrov, the foreman, awaits with his clipboard. Brigade 8, Tunnel C today. We've had some collapses in B, so they're bringing in support beams. What he doesn't say is what happened to the men who were working in Tunnel B when it collapsed. Some questions are better left unasked. You know what I discovered in my research, I say. The miners didn't even have proper helmets. Think about that. Working in unstable tunnels with rocks constantly falling, and the best protection they had was a cloth cap. In American mines during the same period, hard hats were standard. But prisoners? They were lucky to get boots. Tunnel C is one of the worst, a narrow seam that requires you to work on your knees or bent at the waist. Today you're assigned to be a picker, which means hacking at the coal face with a pickaxe while others shovel the loosened coal into carts. Watch for the sparklers, Taras warns as you begin. He's referring to the small sparks that sometimes appear when your pick strikes certain types of rock, a warning sign of methane. Hit enough of those sparklers, and the whole tunnel could ignite in a flash. The work begins as it always does, slow, methodical, painful. The air is so thick with dust that your headlamp creates a cone of visible particles. Every breath coats your lungs with black powder that you'll be coughing up for hours after your shift. The lung diseases were almost universal, I note. Black lung, silicosis, tuberculosis accelerated by coal dust. One survivor estimated that a miner who avoided accidents might last 5 years before his lungs gave out completely. Your brigade has 20 men, split into smaller teams. You work with Taras and 2 others, a former Moscow accountant named Pavel and a Latvian farmer called Janis. Each has their role. You pick, Pavel and Janis shovel, Taras pushes the filled cart to the main tunnel where it's attached to others and pulled to the surface. The rhythm of the work becomes almost hypnotic. Swing, crack, swing, crack. The coal face gradually recedes as you chip away at it. Your arms and back protest, but you've learned to ignore them. Pain is the constant companion of every prisoner. Acknowledge it, but never surrender to it. Gress, check. Petrov's voice echoes down the tunnel. He appears with his clipboard, counting filled carts, estimating tonnage. You're falling behind. Pick up the pace or nobody eats tonight. It's an empty threat. They can't actually withhold all food without risking a riot, but they can and do reduce rations for failing to meet quota. The difference between a full ration and a reduced one might seem small to an outsider, but to a starving prisoner it's the margin between survival and becoming a goner. I'll help with picking, Taras offers when Petrov leaves. We can switch out every hour. You nod gratefully. This is how you survive. Small kindnesses, shared burdens. The administration tries to pit prisoners against each other, but in the mines, cooperation is the only way to live. By midday, your arms feel leaden. Sweat soaks your clothes despite the chill of the tunnel. The dust has formed a paste on your skin, in your eyes, between your teeth. Your water bottle is long empty, your morning bread consumed. Hunger gnaws at your belly, but it's a familiar sensation now, almost a friend. Hang on, Taras says suddenly, holding up a hand. Listen. Everyone freezes. In the mines, unexpected sounds usually mean danger. A low creaking comes from somewhere above, like wood under stress. Support beams, Pavel whispers. We need to... He never finishes the sentence. With a crack like a gunshot, the timber support nearest to your position splinters. A shower of coal and rock follows. Not a full collapse, but enough to send everyone scrambling backward. Out! Taras shouts. Move! You stumble away from the partial collapse, heart hammering. When the dust settles, you see that your work area is now partially blocked. No one is hurt, but the message is clear. The mountain is hungry today. So, what are you supposed to do in this situation? I ask. Report it? Take a break? Nope. The quota doesn't care about safety. The foreman just moved miners to a different section and expected them to make up for lost time. Imagine watching part of your workplace collapse, then being told, keep working or you don't eat tonight. Petrov arrives to survey the damage, his face impassive. Move to section 5, he orders, and you're still expected to meet quota. Section 5 is even deeper, even hotter. The air there is so bad that men sometimes faint after an hour, but you have no choice. In the Gulag, orders aren't suggestions. The new section requires a 15-minute walk through ever-narrowing tunnels. By the time you arrive, precious work time has been lost. Your team sets up again, distributing picks and shovels, positioning carts, checking the stability of support beams with experienced taps. We'll never hit 15 tons now, Pavel mutters. Then we work until we do, Taras replies simply, and so the labour continues. Your muscles scream in protest, but you find that second wind that comes from necessity. The human body has reserves it only reveals when survival is at stake. Hours blend together in the darkness. The mine has no day or night, no seasons, no weather, just endless black rock, the scrape of metal on coal, the creaking of supports, the rumble of distant carts. I've seen men lose track of time completely down here, I remark. One survivor described how he'd sometimes forget if it was winter or summer, 1935 or 1940. The mine became its own universe with its own rules. Midway through the afternoon, though you have no way to know the exact time, a commotion breaks out in a nearby section. Shouts echo down the tunnel, followed by the sound of running feet. Cave in, someone yells. Section 6. Your team freezes. Section 6 is just beyond the bend in your tunnel, close enough that another collapse could trigger one in your area. Guards and foremen rush past. There's an evacuation procedure of sorts, though it's rarely followed properly. Officially, all miners should head to the main shaft in an orderly fashion. Unofficially, it's often chaos. Stay put, Taurus advises. If we run, they'll mark us as troublemakers. So you wait, listening to the sounds of rescue or recovery from the next section. The shouting eventually subsides, replaced by the rhythmic sound of digging. Then stretchers move past your position, carrying still forms covered with jackets. How many? Pavel asks a passing worker. 3 dead, 2 injured, the man replies without stopping. Support beam cracked right down the middle. You cross yourself, a gesture you abandoned years before Vorkuta, but have resumed here where faith is sometimes the only thing keeping men going. The dead could easily have been you or your teammates. Mining accidents are so common they barely register as unusual events. Just last week, a man 2 tunnels over was crushed when a coal car jumped its track. The week before, 2 men asphyxiated in a pocket of bad air. The death toll from accidents was actually higher than from the cold or hunger in the mining camps, I point out. One report I found estimated that in Vorkuta's worst years they lost 3 to 5 men per day to mining accidents, and those were just the reported ones. Work resumes with barely a pause. Death is acknowledged but not dwelled upon. The living still have quotas to meet. By the time your shift should be ending, your brigade has produced perhaps 12 tons of coal, well short of the 15-ton quota. As expected, Petrov announces you'll be working extended hours. Nobody comes up until we hit 15, he says flatly. This is when the real test begins. Working past exhaustion, past hunger, past the point where your body screams for rest. The brain becomes fuzzy, reactions slow, mistakes more common. It's when most accidents happen. They called it the final hour, I say quietly. Except it wasn't an hour. It could be 4, 5, 6 extra hours of work when you were already dead on your feet. Survivors described it as a waking nightmare where you'd hallucinate from exhaustion but still had to swing that pickaxe. Your team adopts a rotation system to cope. 3 work while 1 rests for 10 minutes, then switch. It's technically against regulations, but even Petrov looks the other way. Better to have men working at 75% capacity than collapsing entirely. The hours drag on. Men grow silent, conserving every ounce of energy for the work. Your world narrows to the coal face in front of you, the weight of the pick in your hands, the burning in your muscles. Near what must be midnight, the brigade leader announces you've hit 14 tons. Almost there. One final push. It's during this push that the accident happens. Pavel, exhausted beyond reason, misjudges his footing while maneuvering a filled cart. The heavy vehicle rolls back, pinning his leg against the tunnel wall. His scream echoes through the shaft. You and Taurus rush to help, lifting the cart enough for Janis to pull Pavel free. His leg is clearly broken, bone visible through torn pants and flesh. "Get the medic," you shout, but everyone knows the reality. The camp medics don't come into the mine for a single injury. Pavel will have to make it to the surface first. "I can't climb," he gasps through clenched teeth. "Can't put weight on it." "We'll carry you," Taurus says, though you're all so exhausted the prospect seems impossible. Petrov arrives, surveys the situation with cold eyes. "Put him in an empty cart. You two, get him to the surface. The rest of you, back to work. We're still short." And so Taurus and you begin the grueling process of pushing a coal cart containing Pavel through the narrow tunnels toward the main shaft. His face is grey with pain, teeth gritted to keep from crying out at every bump and jostle. "Sorry," you mutter after a particularly rough section. "Almost there." "Not your fault," he manages to reply. "Just get me up." The journey to the main shaft seems endless. By the time you reach it, your remaining strength is nearly gone. The cage operator eyes Pavel in the cart, sighs, and gestures for you to wheel him on. "Both of you go up with him," he says. "No sense sending you back down this late." It's a small mercy, one of the rare ones in Vorkuta. You gratefully squeeze onto the platform with the cart. The ascent is disorienting after so many hours below ground. The air gradually changes, becomes cooler, slightly fresher. The darkness above gives way to dim light, and then you're at the surface. The shock of emerging is always the same, a momentary disbelief at the existence of a world beyond the mine. Tonight, it's snowing heavily, fat flakes swirling under the harsh work lights. The cold hits like a physical blow after the relative warmth of the mine depths. Camp medics take Pavel away on a stretcher. You'll learn later that he lost the leg, amputation being the standard treatment for most serious injuries. He'll be assigned to lighter duties if he survives, perhaps boot repair or kitchen work. Injuries like that were common, I note, and in a sick way, some prisoners saw them as a twisted blessing. Lose a limb, get out of the mines. Some men deliberately maimed themselves for exactly that reason, anything to escape the underground death trap. The walk back to camp is a stumbling nightmare. Your legs barely support you, your lungs burn from coal dust, your empty stomach cramps painfully, but somehow you make it through evening roll call, through the perfunctory meal of watery soup and bread, back to the relative sanctuary of your barracks. You collapse onto your bunk, too exhausted even to remove your filthy clothes. Sleep takes you immediately, but it's not restful. In your dreams, you're still in the mine, still picking at coal that never ends, still hearing the creaks of support beams ready to give way. I talked to a Vorkuta survivor once, I say softly. He told me he still had the same nightmare 60 years later, still heard the sounds of picks on coal, still felt the dust in his lungs. The mine never really let him go. The next morning comes too soon. As always, your body protests every movement, muscles stiff and sore, lungs still congested with dust. But the bell rings and you rise. Roll call waits for no one. At breakfast, news circulates that quotas have indeed been raised to 18 tons per brigade. A collective groan rises from the mess hall. 18 tons means even longer shifts, even more exhaustion, even more accidents. "They're trying to kill us faster," someone mutters. "No," Taurus corrects. "They're trying to get more coal with fewer guards, fewer rations, fewer resources. Our dying is just a side effect they don't care about." The morning brings another surprise. Mikhail approaches your table, his face grim. "They're reassigning me," he says without preamble. "Back to the mines. Doctor says I'm recovered enough." You all know what this means. Mikhail is still weak from pneumonia. The mines will likely kill him within weeks. "Which section?" Taurus asks. Mine 9, Brigade 3. A glance passes between Taurus and Rain. Mine 9 is the worst of all. Deeper, more dangerous, with more accidents and deaths than any other. "I'll speak to Petrov," Taurus says. "See if he can get you in our brigade instead. At least we can look out for you." Mikhail nods gratefully, but his eyes show he doesn't expect much. The administration rarely grants such requests. The camp system is designed to separate, isolate, break bonds between prisoners. The whole system was intentionally arbitrary, I explain. That was by design. If prisoners could predict what would happen, they might game the system. But when any day might bring reassignment, punishment, or death for no reason, that breaks people faster than anything. The bell rings for work assignments. Another day in the mines awaits. Another shift of coal dust and danger, of back-breaking labor and gnawing hunger. Another day of Vorkuta. As you file out of the mess hall, Taurus grips your shoulder briefly. One day at a time, he says. Just focus on today. It's the closest thing to wisdom the Gulag has to offer. Don't think about your 10-year sentence. Don't think about the approaching winter. Don't think about tomorrow's quota or next week's hunger. Just survive today. The mine, the cold, the exhaustion, the hunger. One more day in the deep black seams beneath Vorkuta, where men are spent like currency in Stalin's mad rush for coal. 3 months into your sentence, you discover that Vorkuta isn't just a prison camp. It's a society with its own unwritten laws, power structures, and social hierarchies. Complex, brutal, and entirely focused on survival. It's like a twisted mirror of the outside world, Mikhail explains one evening after dinner. He survived his reassignment to Mine 9 when Taurus somehow convinced Petrov to transfer him to your brigade instead. We have our aristocracy, our middle class, our untouchables. You've begun to notice these distinctions. The camp has clear castes, as rigidly defined as any ancient empire. So tonight we're talking social dynamics, I interject. This is where it gets interesting, because these camps weren't just places of suffering, they were entire micro-societies. People formed bonds, fell in love, made enemies, built reputations, all the drama of human life just concentrated and intensified by extreme circumstances. At the top of Vorkuta's hierarchy are the trustees, prisoners who work with the administration, camp guards who are themselves former prisoners, clerks who handle the paperwork, foremen who oversee work brigades. They wear better clothes, eat better food, sleep in separate quarters. Never trust a trustee, Taurus warned you early on. They sold their souls for an extra bowl of soup. But it's more complicated than that. Some trustees use their position to help other prisoners when they can. A warning about upcoming inspections, an extra ration slipped to a dying man, a work reassignment that might save someone's life. Others are crueler than the regular guards, desperate to prove their loyalty to the administration. Below the trustees are the skilled workers, doctors, engineers, mechanics, cooks. Their specialized knowledge makes them valuable enough to be treated marginally better. They work indoors, away from the worst weather. Their barracks might have slightly better heating. Their food might include an extra ladleful of soup. Then come the criminal prisoners, thieves, murderers, gangsters from Russia's underworld. Though they do the same labor as political prisoners, they enjoy unofficial privileges. Guards tend to leave them alone. They run protection rackets, control the black market, claim the best bunks in the barracks. The administration actually encouraged this system, I note. They deliberately put criminals in charge of politicals. It created a buffer between themselves and the mass of prisoners. If something went wrong, they could blame the criminal trustees, not the system itself. The zakone, thieves in law, are the elite among criminals, members of a brotherhood with its own strict code. They refuse official work assignments on principle, forcing other prisoners to fulfill their quotas. They extort taxes from anyone receiving packages from home. They wear distinctive tattoos marking their rank and crimes. See that man? Taurus nods toward a barrel-chested prisoner with tattoos covering his hands and neck. That's Ivanich. He runs most of the rackets in our sector. Cross him and you won't wake up the next morning. At the very bottom of the hierarchy are the political prisoners like you. Teachers, engineers, writers, farmers, workers. Anyone convicted under Article 58 for counter-revolutionary activities. You have no rights, no privileges, no protection except what you can secure through alliances or bribery. And below, even you are the untouchables, the goners in the camp slang, men too weak to work, too sick to recover, too broken to fight anymore. They're walking corpses, and everyone knows it. Guards ignore them, other prisoners avoid them, partly from fear their bad luck might be contagious, partly to protect themselves from the pain of forming attachments to the doomed. You never want to become a goner, Mikhail says quietly. Once you cross that line, you're already dead. The moment you stop fighting to live, Vorkuta takes you. You've seen it happen. Men who give up simply fade away, growing thinner and weaker until one morning they don't rise for roll call. Their bodies are dragged out and buried in mass graves outside the camp perimeter, unmarked and unmourned. The social dynamics weren't just about who got more bread, I explain. They determined who lived and who died. Make friends with the right cook, you might get an extra ladleful of soup every day, enough to keep you alive through winter. Offend the wrong criminal, you might wake up with a shiv between your ribs. Your own position in this complex hierarchy has been slowly improving. You've proven yourself a reliable worker, neither shirking nor collaborating with the administration. You've formed alliances with Mikhail, Taras, and Rain, a small family that pools resources and watches each other's backs. You've learned to recognize which guards can be bribed and which must be avoided at all costs. The guards themselves form another layer in this social tapestry. Some are sadists who enjoy inflicting suffering. Some are indifferent, just doing their job. A few show small mercies when they can do so without being observed. That one, Stepanov, he's not bad. Ryan whispers during an evening work detail. If you're sick, he might look the other way, but never try it with Kuznetsov. He'll send you to the punishment cells for sneezing wrong. You learn to read these distinctions. Guard Borisov accepts cigarettes to deliver notes between prisoners in different barracks. Guard Sokolov can be persuaded to assign you to easier work details for a piece of sausage from a care package. Guard Volkov beats prisoners for sport and should be avoided entirely. That's Pavel. Wasn't he in your brigade? I ask, pointing to a one-legged man hobbling across the yard on crude wooden crutches. You nod. Pavel survived his amputation, but now works in the camp workshop making boots. His daily bread ration is smaller since he can't do heavy labour, but he supplements it by repairing guards' personal items for payment in food. Interactions between prisoners are governed by unwritten rules. Never inform on another prisoner, even your worst enemy. Never steal another man's bread. Never ask about another's crime or sentence. Never express hope or make plans for the future. It's considered bad luck. The most dangerous figures in camp are the informers, prisoners who report to the administration about escape plans, contraband, or prohibited conversations. They're despised by everyone, but protected by the guards who use their information. See how nobody sits near Dmitri? Mikhail nods toward a thin man eating alone in the mess hall. 3 men disappeared after conversations with him. Now he's marked. If the guards weren't protecting him, he'd be dead by morning. Camp justice is swift and merciless. Informers often die in accidents, a mining collapse that somehow kills just one person, a fall from a high bunk, a sudden illness after eating. The guards investigate half-heartedly, if at all, one less mouth to feed. I asked a former guard once about the informants I mention. He told me they had a life expectancy of about 3 months after other prisoners identified them. The administration would just recruit new ones. It was a perfect system for them. Cheap intelligence that periodically self-destructed. But there are positive relationships too. Friendships formed despite the administration's efforts to prevent them. Men from the same hometown or profession seek each other out. Those who speak the same language gravitate together. The camp holds prisoners from across the Soviet Union and beyond. Russians, Ukrainians, Balts, Caucasians, Central Asians. former Nazi prisoners of war, even some American soldiers captured during the Korean War. This diversity creates both tension and solidarity. The Ukrainians stick together, Taras explains. He's Ukrainian himself, from a village near Kiev. So do the Balts. The administration tries to split us up, mix the barracks, but we find ways to help our own. Ethnic tensions sometimes flare, particularly between groups with historical grievances. Russians and Chechens eye each other warily. Ukrainians and Poles have their own complex history, but common suffering often bridges these divides. In the face of the true enemy, the camp administration, old hatreds sometimes fade. My father fought against the Russians in the Estonian Independence War, Rain tells you one night. Now I'm sharing my bread with a Russian professor and a Ukrainian farmer. The world is strange. Romance exists too, though the camps segregate men and women. Secret notes are passed between male and female zones. Brief encounters occur during work details. Guards can be bribed to look the other way for a few precious minutes. Vitali from Barracks 8 is in love with a woman from the female sector, Mikhail tells you, a rare smile crossing his face. They met during agricultural work last summer. Now he trades his tobacco ration to a guard who delivers his letters to her. Love was rare but powerful in the camps, I note. I read one account from a woman prisoner who said falling in love was what saved her. Having someone to live for, to survive for, it gave her a reason to keep going when everything else seemed hopeless. The black market flourishes despite constant surveillance. Everything has value in Vorkuta. Cigarettes, bread, clothing, medicine, tools, information. Transactions happen in shadows, in whispers, in subtle hand signals. Goods change hands during work shifts, in latrine visits, in the brief moments before lights out. You witness an exchange during lunch, a pack of cigarettes passed under the table in return for what looks like a small jar of fat, probably saved from multiple soup rations. Neither man acknowledges the transaction visibly, their eyes never meet, but both walk away satisfied. Where do the cigarettes come from? You ask Taras later. Guards sell them, or prisoners with access to the supply warehouses steal them, or they come in care packages and get traded. Everything finds its way into the market eventually. Care packages from home are the most prized possessions in camp. Not every prisoner is permitted to receive them, and not every family can afford to send them, but those who get packages gain instant status and currency for the black market. I haven't been approved for packages yet, you tell Mikhail. As a new prisoner, you're still waiting for permission to notify your family of your location and receive mail. It'll come, maybe after 6 months if you stay out of trouble, he assures you. Though by then, who knows if your family will still be at the same address. The authorities don't exactly help them track you down. Cultural life persists even in this hell. Engineers sketch building designs in the dirt during breaks. Musicians fashion crude instruments from camp materials. A balalaika made from wood scraps and wire, a drum from a tin can and stretched cloth. Poets compose verses in their heads during work shifts, reciting them at night to appreciative audiences. Mikhail's stories save lives, Rain tells you. On the worst nights when men are ready to give up, he reminds us there's a world beyond the wire, a world worth surviving for. The cultural stuff wasn't just entertainment, I explain. It was resistance, creating beauty in a place designed to destroy the human spirit. That's revolution in its purest form. Religion thrives underground, despite official prohibition. Orthodox Christians cross themselves when guards aren't looking. Muslims pray silently during work breaks, facing Mecca. Jews risk punishment to observe high holidays. Faith provides comfort where nothing else can. You notice an old man who traces a cross on his chest before eating his bread each day. His name is Father Sergei, a Russian Orthodox priest serving 20 years for refusing to close his church. His quiet dignity has earned him respect from prisoners of all backgrounds. The guards know he leads secret prayers, Mikhail whispers, but they leave him alone mostly. Even they have limits, it seems. Political discussions happen in hushed tones, late at night. Not everyone here is anti-Soviet. Some prisoners maintain their communist convictions despite their imprisonment, arguing they were falsely accused or that Stalin has betrayed the revolution. Others have become fierce opponents of the regime that sent them here. Debates can become heated, though always quiet enough to avoid guard attention. I believed in the party, a former factory director tells you during a rare moment of candor. I still believe in the ideas, but the system is corrupt to its core. Stalin has twisted everything Lenin built. Watch yourself, Taras warns after the man leaves. That kind of talk gets people sent to the punishment cells. Information is perhaps the most valuable currency in camp. News from outside about political changes, international relations, amnesties in other camps travels through an elaborate prisoner grapevine that somehow bridges even the isolation of the Arctic Circle. "Heard anything new?" is the standard greeting between prisoners who haven't seen each other for a few days. "They say there's trouble in the Kremlin," a kitchen worker whispers during dinner service. "Stalin's health is failing." Nobody knows if such rumours are true, but they sustain hope. Any change might bring improvement, or at least a different kind of suffering. The information networks were incredible, I remark. Prisoners would piece together news from snippets overheard from guards, from newly arrived inmates, from scraps of newspapers used as toilet paper. They often knew major world events before the official announcements. Education continues informally. Professors teach foreign languages to small groups using sticks to write in the snow. Engineers explain principles of construction to former farmers. Doctors share medical knowledge that might save lives in a place with minimal health care. Mikhail taught me to read better Russian, Ryan tells you proudly. In return, I teach him Estonian swear words. These small exchanges maintain humanity in a place designed to strip it away, learning, teaching, sharing, acts of resistance against a system that views prisoners as nothing more than labour units. The camp administration works constantly to disrupt social bonds. Prisoner transfers between barracks or work brigades happen regularly, breaking up friendships and alliances. New prisoners arrive, bringing different dynamics. Old prisoners disappear to other camps or into the permafrost graves outside the wire. But human connection proves remarkably resilient. New bonds form as quickly as old ones are broken. Information networks repair themselves. Support systems rebuild. The social fabric of Vorkuta, though constantly torn, weaves itself back together through thousands of small acts of solidarity. That's the thing about trying to break human connections, I observe. It never fully works. Even in the worst places, people find ways to help each other, protect each other, remind each other they're still human. Your own small circle has grown. Beyond Mikhail, Taras and Rain, you've formed tentative friendships with others. Pavel with his one leg, a young Georgian named Dato who works in the kitchen, an old Muscovite engineer called Fyodor who knows which mine tunnels are safest. These connections might save your life as winter approaches. Already the days are growing shorter, the temperature dropping further. Veterans say the real test of Vorkuta comes during the polar night, weeks of darkness when temperatures plunge to -50 and below. Stick close to us, Taras tells you as you trudge back from the mines one evening, the northern lights flickering overhead in ribbons of green and blue. First, winter's the hardest. We'll get through it together. You nod, grateful for this small promise of solidarity. In a place where men are reduced to numbers, where death is as common as breakfast, where betrayal might come from any direction, the simple words, "we'll get through it together," are more precious than gold. The complex social world of Vorkuta won't save you from the cold, the hunger, the exhaustion, or the coal dust filling your lungs, but it might, just might, preserve enough of your humanity to survive until spring. If spring ever comes to this frozen corner of Stalin's empire, winter descends on Vorkuta like a predator, patient, merciless, hungry for the weak. By early November, darkness has nearly swallowed the camp. The sun appears for just a few hours each day, a pale disk barely clearing the horizon before sinking again. The cold up there isn't like cold anywhere else, I explain. It's not just a temperature, it's an entity, a presence, like a physical weight pressing down on everything. At -40, your spit freezes before it hits the ground. At -50, which was common in Vorkuta winters, the air itself seems to crystallize. Your brigade has been moved from the mines to outdoor work, clearing snow from the railways that transport coal to the southern cities. It's considered a death assignment. At least in the mines you had shelter from the wind and relative warmth from the earth itself. Outside, nothing protects you from the elements. Keep moving, Taras advises as you chip at frozen snow with a metal bar. Stop moving. You die. Simple as that. He's not exaggerating. Already this week, 2 men from another brigade froze to death during their shift. They sat down just for a moment during a break. Guards found them still sitting, turned to ice. The camp provides no proper winter clothing, just the same thin jackets and pants you've worn since arrival. Prisoners develop desperate innovations, stuffing newspapers inside shirts for insulation, wrapping feet in scraps of cloth, tying bread bags over ears to prevent frostbite. Your hands are turning white, Mikhail warns, grabbing your wrist. That's frostbite starting. You need to warm them now. He shows you the veteran's technique, placing hands in armpits, underarms, between thighs, anywhere body heat might thaw the creeping death in your fingers. The pain, when circulation returns, is excruciating, like thousands of needles stabbing simultaneously. But the alternative is losing digits or entire limbs. I talked to a survivor who lost all his toes his first winter, I note. He said the camp doctor just snipped them off with garden shears. No anesthesia, no real medical care. After that, he had to stuff rags in the front of his boots to keep them from falling off when he walked. By December, the polar night arrives in full. The sun vanishes completely, not to return for weeks. Darkness rules except for the harsh floodlights illuminating work areas and the camp perimeter. The effect on morale is devastating. Men grow silent, withdrawn. Arguments flare over nothing. Small tasks become overwhelming. The darkness gets inside your head, Rain explains, when you ask about the strange mood in the barracks. Makes you forget there was ever anything else. Makes you think this is all there is, all there ever was or will be. The Estonian speaks from experience. This is his 3rd winter in Vorkuta. Each year the polar night claims more victims, not just from cold, but from despair. Suicide rates spike. Men walk deliberately into forbidden zones to be shot by guards. Others simply stop eating, preferring a faster end to the slow torture of survival. Guards grow harsher during winter, imposing stricter discipline when prisoners are at their weakest. Quotas remain unchanged despite the brutal conditions. Food rations, if anything, decrease. The administration knows winter will reduce the camp population naturally, solving their overcrowding problems. The first big storm is the worst, Taurus tells you as you huddle together during evening meal. Outside, wind howls like a living thing, driving snow horizontally past the barracks windows. 3 days of this, maybe 4. We won't go outside until it passes. Being snowbound in the barracks brings its own challenges. 50 men confined in a space designed for 30, with minimal sanitation and dwindling food. The stove in the centre provides barely enough heat to prevent freezing, let alone comfort. Men wear every piece of clothing they own, even while sleeping. You learn the winter survival tricks from the veterans. Sleep in the middle of the barracks, away from the walls where ice forms inside. Stuff paper into your clothes for insulation. Keep bread inside your shirt so it doesn't freeze solid. Melt snow in your mouth when thirst becomes unbearable. Never, ever lick metal. Had a new guy last year, Rain recalls grimly. Someone dared him to lick a shovel handle. His tongue stuck instantly, tore half of it off trying to get free, bled to death before they could get him to the infirmary. The storm rages for 5 days. When it finally subsides, the camp resembles an alien landscape. Snow has drifted higher than a man's head in places. Buildings are half buried, paths have vanished completely. Work brigades spend days just digging out. Men disappear up to their chests in snow, creating narrow channels between buildings. The mines, at least temporarily, are inaccessible. The administration focuses on clearing the railway first. Coal shipments must continue regardless of weather. "Look at that," Mikhail says quietly, pointing upward one night as you trudge back to the barracks. Above you, the northern lights dance across the sky in rippling curtains of green and blue. The beauty is so unexpected, so at odds with the hell around you, that it stops you in your tracks. For a moment, just one moment, you forget where you are. Aurora borealis, Mikkel explains, caused by solar particles hitting the atmosphere. At least that's the scientific explanation. The Nenets natives believe they're the spirits of the dead dancing. Maybe both are true, you suggest. The Northern Lights were one of the few genuine comforts prisoners had, I remark. Several survivors mentioned them in their memoirs, how they'd risk punishment by stopping work just to look up at them. Beauty becomes more precious when everything else is ugly. December brings the nadir of existence, the darkest days, the coldest temperatures, the highest death rates. Men die in their sleep from exposure, despite being indoors. The infirmary fills with frostbite cases, pneumonia victims, men broken by the relentless assault of winter. Your small circle grows even closer, pooling resources to survive. Taurus trades his prized pocket knife for an extra blanket that you all share. Mikhail tells stories each night to maintain morale. Rain, with his Estonian fisherman's background, shows you all how to properly layer clothing for maximum warmth with minimum bulk. We stick together, we live, Taurus says simply. We split up, we die. The administration has a different strategy. As winter deepens, they increase pressure on prisoners through reduced rations, longer work hours, and arbitrary punishments. Breaking the human spirit is as much a goal as extracting labor. They know exactly what they're doing. Mikhail observes bitterly. Winter weakens the body. They weaken the mind. Together, they break the soul. The punishment cells claim their highest toll during winter. A 3-day sentence becomes a virtual death penalty when the unheated concrete boxes drop to 50 below zero. Men return, if they return at all, with blackened limbs, vacant eyes, pneumonia rattling in their lungs. The doctor told us how brutal these cells were, I interject. In his report to Moscow, which was never meant to be published, he wrote that the punishment cells in winter represented a technique of execution without the need for bullets. They knew exactly what they were doing. Christmas passes unmarked officially, though Christian prisoners observe it in whispers. New Year arrives with no celebration. January brings the first hint of returning light, a faint glow on the southern horizon at midday. It's not actual sunrise, just the promise that darkness won't rule forever. "We've passed the worst," Mikhail says, nodding toward the distant glow. "From here, each day brings more light." The psychological effect of this simple fact is remarkable. Men stand straighter, conversation returns to the barracks. Even the grueling work seems slightly more bearable with the promise of light's return. But winter is far from over. February brings the coldest temperatures of the year. Though daylight gradually increases, the camp remains gripped in ice, the landscape a monochrome study in white and grey. Work continues regardless of conditions. The coal must flow, the quotas must be met, the machine of Soviet industry must be fed. "The worst thing is the never-ending nature of it," Rain says one evening, as you all huddle around the barracks stove. "Summer, winter, they work us the same. No holidays, no rest, just endless labour until we die." March brings slightly warmer temperatures but new hazards. The snow begins to melt during day hours, then refreezes at night, creating treacherous ice. Falls become common, resulting in broken bones that never properly heal. The camp roads turn to sludge, making transportation of coal nearly impossible. And then, just as spring seems possible, nature plays its cruelest joke, a massive blizzard in early April that buries the camp once more. The sudden return to winter conditions breaks something in many prisoners. Men who survived months of cold and darkness collapse under this final insult. "Happened last year too," Taras tells you as you dig out the paths again. Spring blizzard, always one last killer before the thaw. You've noticed something about yourself in recent weeks, a dullness of emotion, a distance from your own suffering. It's as if you're observing your life rather than living it. Food doesn't taste, pain doesn't register fully, fear has become background noise. You recognize this as a survival mechanism, but it troubles you nonetheless. Are you still human if you can't feel? It's normal, Mikhail assures you when you confide this concern. The mind protects itself. Feel too much here, you break. Feel nothing, you survive. The trick is remembering how to feel again later if you get out. If, you repeat, not when. After 6 months in Vorkuta, optimism feels like a foolish luxury. As April progresses, genuine spring finally arrives. The sun returns fully, climbing higher in the sky each day. Snow begins melting in earnest, revealing the filth beneath. Months of human waste, garbage, and the occasional corpse that went unnoticed under snowdrifts. The smell is overwhelming after the clean scent of snow and ice. The camp becomes a swamp of mud and excrement. Disease spreads: dysentery, typhus, influenza. In some ways, spring brings more death than winter's depths. "At least it's not cold," Rain says, trying to find the bright side as you wade through knee-deep mud to reach the work area. But the warming temperatures bring a new phenomenon, one that veterans have warned you about, with expressions of mingled dread and resignation. As May approaches, the sun stops setting altogether. The polar day begins. "It messes with your head worse than the darkness," Taras explains as you lie awake in your bunk, bright sunlight streaming through the barracks windows at midnight. Can't sleep properly, lose track of time, start seeing things that aren't there. For 3 months, from late May to early August, the sun will never set at Vorkuta. Constant daylight, 24 hours a day. The administration issues no eye covers, no additional window coverings. Sleep becomes fragmented, insufficient. Men grow irritable, then irrational. It's like torture. But so weird, I comment. In one survivor's memoir, he said the constant light was worse than the beatings. At least pain ends. The light never stopped. Never. The body gets confused, brain chemistry goes haywire, people start breaking down. The unnatural light creates surreal scenes. Men working night shifts under a bright sun, guards conducting 3 a.m. roll calls in broad daylight. The usual rhythm of day and night disappears, replaced by an endless, disorienting present. The Nenets natives prepare for this, Mikhail explains, always ready with a scientific or cultural perspective. They adjust their sleep patterns gradually. We just get thrown into it. No wonder it drives men mad. You develop your own coping methods, a cloth tied over your eyes when sleeping, mental discipline to maintain a sense of time despite the sun's position, regular routines regardless of the light, but still the constant brightness wears on you, creating a persistent headache, a sense of unreality. The summer brings unexpected hazards. Melting permafrost releases rotting vegetation and corpses from previous years, contaminating the camp's water supply. Mosquitoes appear in staggering numbers, clouds so thick they can choke a man who breathes them in. The barracks become stifling, airless ovens under the constant sun. "I'll take winter," groans Pavel, swatting futilely at the insects swarming around his face. His amputation wound has become infected in the warm, unsanitary conditions. At least you can add more clothes in the cold, can't take off your skin in the heat. The constant light affects different prisoners in different ways. Some become manic, talking rapidly, working with feverish energy until they collapse. Others sink into depression, moving like automatons, responding to questions with vacant stares. Arguments escalate to violence more quickly. The infirmary reports more self-inflicted injuries. You find yourself experiencing strange phenomena, moments when the world seems to shift slightly, as if reality itself is becoming unmoored. Colours appear more vivid, then suddenly desaturated. Time stretches and contracts unpredictably. You catch yourself having conversations with people who aren't there. "It's the light," Mikhail explains when you describe these episodes. Sleep deprivation combined with exhaustion and malnutrition. Little hallucinations. We all get them during polar day. They'll pass when the darkness returns. The administration seems to understand the psychological effects of the constant light and uses it to their advantage. Inspections increase, punishments become more frequent, guards provoke prisoners deliberately, knowing their frayed mental state will lead to infractions that justify brutal responses. They're farming reactions, Taras observes grimly, planting seeds of irritation, harvesting excuses for violence. By July, you've been in Vorkuta nearly 9 months. Your body has changed dramatically. Weight lost, muscles hardened by labour, skin weathered by extremes of temperature, lungs damaged by coal dust. But the psychological changes are more profound. You've adapted to a world that would have seemed impossible to your former self. The human capacity for adaptation is remarkable, I note. People survive conditions that should be unsurvivable. The cost is high, though. One survivor told me, "I lived through Vorkuta, but parts of me died there forever." As August approaches, the sun finally begins to set again, if only briefly. The first true night in 3 months brings an almost religious celebration in the barracks. Men weep with relief at the simple gift of darkness, the return of sleep's embrace. "We made it," Rain says quietly, as you all watch the sun dip below the horizon for a short 2 hours. Through winter's night and summer's day, the worst is behind us now. But veterans know better. Autumn brings its own challenges. Cold rains, early snow, the knowledge that another winter is approaching, and winter, when it comes again, will be just as deadly as before. Perhaps more so, given your weakened condition after a year in the Gulag. One season at a time, Mikhail advises. That's all we can manage. You've completed the full cycle of Vorkuta's seasons. The dark winter, the muddy spring, the bright summer, the brief autumn. You've experienced the polar night and the polar day, the extremes of cold and the unexpected miseries of heat. You've watched how these natural phenomena become weapons in the hands of those who run the camp, tools to break those already bent by hunger and exhaustion. And you've survived, not unscathed, not unchanged, but alive. In Vorkuta, that alone is a victory. As the days begin shortening again, as the temperature starts its downward trend, you find yourself oddly calm. The approaching winter holds no mysteries now, only familiar hardships. You know what to expect. You know how to endure. The second year is easier in some ways, harder in others, Taras tells you. The body knows what's coming, prepares itself, but the mind begins to understand how long 10 years really is. That's the danger. You nod, understanding. Hope and despair are equally dangerous in the Gulag. The trick is finding the narrow path between them, a day-to-day existence focused on immediate survival rather than the crushing weight of your sentence or the distant mirage of freedom. As summer fades into autumn, as the cycle prepares to repeat, you realize you've gained something unexpected in this place of loss, a visceral understanding of human endurance, of adaptation, of survival against impossible odds. Whether that knowledge will save you or haunt you remains to be seen. The seasons turn in their eternal cycle, and in Vorkuta the prisoners turn with them, like planets around a sun they cannot escape. A year into your sentence at Vorkuta, you've witnessed countless deaths, endured unimaginable hardships, and lost pieces of yourself you didn't know could be taken. Yet amid this systematic destruction of human dignity, something unexpected happens. You begin to notice moments of grace, small, fragile, but unmistakably real. Think about this, I say quietly. In a place engineered to strip away humanity, designed by people who saw prisoners as nothing but labor units, individuals still found ways to be human. That's either the most heartbreaking thing about the Gulag or the most hopeful, maybe both. It starts with bread. One evening, after a particularly brutal shift in the mines, you return to your bunk to find a small piece, maybe 20 grams, wrapped in a scrap of cloth and tucked under your thin pillow. You look around, but nobody meets your eye. The giver remains anonymous, the gift unexplained. Someone noticed you struggling today, Mikhail says later when you show him. This is how it happens. Someone helps you. Later, you help someone else. The circle continues. In a world where stealing bread means death, giving it away is a profound act of resistance. You eat the small piece slowly, savouring each crumb, wondering at the courage of whoever sacrificed their own survival for yours. The next week, you notice a young newcomer, a Georgian boy, barely 18, trembling with cold and fear during his first roll call. When the guards aren't looking, you slip him your mittens, crude things made from scraps, but better than bare hands against metal tools. His look of gratitude stays with you for days. You're learning, Taras approves when he sees the exchange. This is how we stay human. These small kindnesses happen everywhere once you begin looking for them. A prisoner with access to the kitchen sneaks potato peels to the weakest men. A barber offers free haircuts to new arrivals, helping them adjust to camp life. A former doctor treats wounds after hours, using primitive remedies made from boiled herbs and stolen bandages. The administration forbids helping others, Mikhail explains. They want us competing for scraps, fighting amongst ourselves. When we cooperate instead, we're defying the entire system. culture becomes another form of resistance. One night after dinner, a Ukrainian prisoner produces a balalaika fashioned from wood scraps, wire from the mines, and glue made from boiled fish bones. He plays folk songs from home, keeping the volume low enough that guards won't hear. Men gather around, momentarily transported beyond the barbed wire. "You play anything?" the Ukrainian asks, offering you the instrument. You shake your head. "But I know some poems, Pushkin mostly." "Recite one," someone urges. "We need words as much as music." And so you find yourself reciting poetry memorized in school years ago, your voice gaining strength as forgotten verses return. The men listen in perfect silence, hungry for beauty in a world of ugliness. "You know what shocked me about camp culture," I interject. "Its sophistication. These weren't just simple sing-alongs. Camps had underground orchestras, poetry recitals, philosophical debates, even theatrical performances. Starving men would trade bread for a chance to hear a Mozart piece played on a homemade violin. Education thrives despite official prohibition. A former university professor teaches calculus to interested prisoners using a stick to write equations in the snow. A linguist offers language lessons during meal breaks, helping men learn English or German in preparation for a future they may never see. Knowledge becomes treasure passed from mind to mind without physical trace. You find yourself teaching what you know, literature, history, bits of foreign language. Your students attend secret classes during brief rest periods or the few minutes before lights out. The guards either don't notice or choose to ignore these gatherings as harmless. "Teaching helps me remember who I was," you tell Mikhail one night, "before I became prisoner number 1731. "That's exactly why it matters," he replies. "The system wants you to forget. Remembering is rebellion." Art appears in unexpected places. A prisoner with access to coloured pencils creates tiny, intricate drawings on scraps of paper, trading them for extra bread or tobacco. Another carves figures from bits of coal, birds in flight, animals, scenes from happier times. These small creations pass from hand to hand, cherished like priceless artifacts. One day, you discover Pavel, the one-legged bootmaker, creating a masterpiece in his workshop. Using scraps of leather, thread, and boot blacking, he's fashioned a detailed map of Moscow, complete with tiny representations of famous buildings. "For my son," he explains when he catches you staring. "When I get out, I'll show him where I used to live, where I proposed to his mother, where I want to take him someday." The map could be considered contraband. Anything that might aid escape is forbidden. But Pavel's creation isn't about escape, it's about remembrance, about maintaining a connection to a world beyond Vorkuta. "I'll never tell anyone," you assure him. His smile is worth more than any bread ration. It's funny, I reflect. The creative impulse can't be killed, even in the worst conditions, maybe especially in the worst conditions. Survivors' accounts are full of stories about secret art, underground literature, music made from scraps. Wherever humans exist, art follows. Romance survives even in this harsh environment. Though men and women are segregated in different camp sections, they find ways to communicate, to maintain connections, to nurture what the Soviets would call bourgeois sentimentality, but what everyone else recognizes as love. You witness one such romance blossoming between Rain and a young Lithuanian woman named Marta, who works in the camp laundry. They exchange notes hidden in clothing sent for washing. They steal glances during the rare mixed work assignments. They risk punishment to stand near the fence, separating the male and female zones, talking in whispers about lives they once had and futures they still dare to imagine. It's madness, Taurus comments when he notices the relationship. Love in this place, like growing flowers in a coal mine. Maybe that's why it matters, you suggest, precisely because it's impossible. Faith endures despite official atheism. Religious prisoners maintain their practices in secret. Orthodox Christians crossing themselves before meals, Muslims praying silently during work breaks, Jews observing high holidays through whispered prayers and small rituals. Father Sergei, the elderly Orthodox priest, holds clandestine services in the latrines where guards rarely venture. You attend one of these services out of curiosity rather than faith, standing among 24 men in the foul-smelling space, hearing ancient prayers spoken with quiet conviction. You find unexpected comfort, not in the religion itself perhaps, but in the unbreakable human spirit it represents. God sees us here, Father Sergei assures his congregation. Even in this place, perhaps especially in this place. Whether true or not, the belief itself seems to strengthen those who hold it. Men return to their bunks with straighter backs, steadier hands, eyes that hold something besides despair. Faith is complicated in the camps, I note. Some lost it completely, asking how God could allow such suffering. Others found deeper belief, insisting that spiritual freedom was the one thing the Soviets couldn't take. Either way, the questions mattered. Humour becomes a lifeline, perhaps the most surprising survival tool. Not light-hearted jokes or easy laughter, those died quickly in the cold. Instead, a darker, sharper wit emerges, a gallows humour that acknowledges horrors while refusing to be crushed by them. "Did you hear?" a miner asks during dinner. "They're reducing our workday to 14 hours. How generous," another replies. "That leaves a whole 10 hours for sleeping, eating, roll call, and dying." Men laugh softly, recognizing the bitter truth beneath the joke. Even the darkest humor reminds you that you're still thinking, still observing, still capable of seeing the absurdity in your situation. Hear about the new camp slogan? Mikhail whispers one evening. "Work to live, live to work, preferably neither for very long." The guards have their own unwitting contributions to camp humour. The political officer delivers monthly lectures on Soviet achievements and the glorious future awaiting the workers' paradise, all while addressing men being worked to death. The irony is so thick it's almost tangible. "Comrade Stalin sends his regards," Taurus deadpans after one such lecture. "He hopes we're enjoying our rehabilitation." Even in the mines, far from guard hearing, small jokes circulate. Men name particularly stubborn coal seams after Soviet officials. They create elaborate fictional biographies for the rats that scurry along tunnel floors. They hold mock socialist competitions to see who can look busy while doing absolutely nothing. Or laughter was medicine, I explain. Several survivors told me that the ability to laugh at their situation, even darkly, kept them sane. The moment you lost your sense of humour was often when hope began to die. Friendship deepens beyond mere survival alliances. Your small circle, Mikhail, Taras, Rain, and now Pavel, has become something like family. You share what little you have, watch each other's backs, provide the human connection necessary for survival. One night, Mikhail falls ill with fever. The official procedure is to report to the infirmary, but winter admissions often return as corpses. Instead, your group pools resources. Taras trades his tobacco ration for extra bread. Rain sacrifices his mittens to keep Mikhail warm. Pavel bribes a kitchen worker for hot water. You take turns sitting with him through the night, cooling his forehead with snow, making sure he drinks. By morning, the fever breaks. Mikhail recovers without official notice. The administration loses another opportunity to record a death. "This is how we win," he says weakly when he's able to speak again. "Not by escaping, not by surviving our sentences, but by remaining human when they want us to be animals." Small acts of defiance occur daily, not dramatic enough to trigger punishment, but significant to those who perform them. Prisoners purposely misunderstand ridiculous orders. They work slowly when guards aren't watching. They create their own internal justice system to resolve disputes without administrative involvement. In the mines, your brigade develops subtle signals to warn each other of approaching foremen or particularly dangerous tunnel sections. You create efficient work methods that meet quota with minimum effort. Sharing these techniques with new prisoners, knowledge becomes power, however limited. I spent decades studying these tiny resistances I mention. They weren't organized rebellion. That would have been suicide. They were almost instinctive, like antibodies fighting disease. Small, continuous actions that maintained dignity when everything else was stripped away. Surprisingly, beauty persists even in Vorkuta's bleakness, the northern lights dancing across winter skies, the perfect silence of fresh snow before dawn roll call, the delicate ice crystals forming on barracks windows. Prisoners pause, despite themselves, to witness these moments. Guards sometimes do too, temporary unity and appreciation of what lies beyond human cruelty. One morning in early spring, work stops spontaneously when the first birds return from southern migration. Men stand motionless, tools temporarily forgotten, watching wild creatures that represent a freedom they can only imagine. Guards allow this brief pause before shouting everyone back to work. "I saw a swan," Rain whispers that night, voice filled with wonder, pure white against the sky. I'd forgotten such things existed. Memory becomes both torment and comfort. Prisoners share stories of their past lives, meals they enjoyed, cities they visited, women they loved, children they raised. These recollections are precious, maintaining connections to identities beyond prisoner or Zek. You find yourself describing your former apartment in vivid detail. The view from the window, the creaky third floorboard, the smell of books lining your small shelf. Others listen with rapt attention, mentally inhabiting this space so different from barracks and mines. In turn, you journey to Taras's Ukrainian village, walk the streets of Rain's Estonian coastal town, visit Mikhail's university office with its perpetually disorganized desk. These imaginary travels sustain you all, reminders that the world continues beyond Vorkuta's wire. The act of remembering became political, I observe. The system wanted prisoners to believe the camp was the only reality, keeping memories alive of freedom, of dignity, of normal life that was resistance. Language evolves within the camp, another form of connection and resistance. Prisoners develop their own vocabulary, incomprehensible to outsiders. They create nicknames for guards, euphemisms for death, codes to warn of danger. This shared lexicon builds community while excluding those who control their lives. "Moose approaching," someone mutters during work detail, a warning that a particularly brutal guard is coming. Everyone immediately looks busy, avoiding eye contact, becoming model prisoners until the threat passes. "The snow is singing," another says at roll call, a coded message that conditions are right for an escape attempt. Though few actually try, the wilderness around Vorkuta is as deadly as the camp itself. The possibility remains part of prisoner consciousness. You learn this secret language gradually, each new term representing acceptance into the prisoner community. Your first contribution, calling the camp administrator the Penguin for his waddling walk, spreads through barracks within days. The small victory lifts your spirits for weeks. Camp language was fascinating, I note. It mixed criminal slang, political terminology, regional expressions, and completely new words born from the Gulag experience. Some terms entered mainstream Russian after Stalin's death, a linguistic ghost of the camp system. Food becomes central to maintaining humanity. Not the meager official rations, but the memories of food, the discussions of recipes, the elaborate mental meals shared during rest periods. Men describe holiday feasts in excruciating detail. The exact colour of borscht, the texture of properly baked bread, the smell of roasting meat. Your contribution to these imaginary banquets is your grandmother's honey cake, 3 layers of sponge soaked in sweet syrup topped with crushed walnuts and cinnamon. You describe the process step by step, ingredient by ingredient, while men close their eyes and almost taste it. "I'll make it for you all when we get out," you promise, allowing yourself rare optimism. "I'll hold you to that," Taras says, equally willing to pretend release is inevitable rather than unlikely. Actual food sharing represents the deepest trust. When Rain receives a rare package from home containing dried fish, he divides it equally among your circle, despite his own hunger. When Mikhail manages to steal an onion from the kitchen, a treasure worth fighting over, he shares it without hesitation. These small feasts, eaten in secretive bites, mean more than the food itself. "The sharing meant you were human," I explain. "Animals hoard food when starving. Humans, at our best, share even when there's not enough. That choice, that refusal to become purely self-interested, was a victory over the camp system." Names matter enormously. The administration uses only prisoner numbers, a deliberate dehumanization technique. Fellow prisoners insist on real names, sometimes formal titles from previous lives. Professor, doctor, engineer, reminders of identities beyond captivity. You notice how carefully new arrivals are asked their names, how these are remembered and used even by prisoners who forget more immediate details. To name someone is to recognize their humanity. To be named is to exist as more than a number. "What did they call you before?" a newcomer asks during his first meal. "Alexander Ivanovich," you reply, suddenly emotional at hearing your patronymic after so long. "Literature teacher." He nods with surprising formality. "I am pleased to meet you, Alexander Ivanovich. I am Dmitry Sergeyevich, formerly a railway engineer from Leningrad." This small exchange of identities feels like defiance, though no rule has technically been broken. "Names were powerful," I remark. "There's a reason the system wanted to replace them with numbers." Several survivors mentioned that hearing their full name spoken was like being briefly freed, like someone recognizing the person beneath the prisoner uniform. Music emerges spontaneously, created from whatever materials are available. A Ukrainian builds a primitive violin using wood scraps and wire from the mines. A Georgian creates percussion instruments from tin food containers filled with pebbles. Men sing softly after evening roll call, folk songs from their homelands, revolutionary anthems with lyrics subtly changed to mock Soviet leadership, lullabies remembered from childhood. The camp administration tolerates this within limits, recognizing that music provides a release that might prevent more dangerous expressions of resistance, but they monitor content carefully, punishing any overtly political performances. You contribute a few Russian folk songs learned in school, your voice rusty from disuse but growing stronger with practice. The familiar melodies connect you to a cultural heritage that exists beyond political imprisonment, beyond the arbitrary borders of Soviet republics. Or music transcended national differences, I note. Men who couldn't communicate through language could still share songs, still recognize melodies from neighboring regions. Music became a universal language when words failed. Stories become currency, particularly among prisoners with literary backgrounds. Mikhail recounts classics from memory, Tolstoy, Dostoevsky, Chekhov, for audiences who listen with complete attention. Others share folk tales from their regions, family histories, even plots from foreign novels smuggled into the Soviet Union before the war. You begin creating original stories, surprised to discover this talent in yourself. Simple tales at first, adventures set in distant lands, mysteries with clever detectives, romances with happy endings. Your fellow prisoners request specific elements, mountains, forests, cities they've never seen. You weave these together, creating temporary escapes from Vorkuta's confines. "When did you start writing?" Mikhail asks after one such session. "I'm not writing," you clarify, "just speaking." "It's writing without paper," he insists. "You should remember these stories for when we're free. They're good, Alexander. They matter. The idea that anything created in Vorkuta might have value beyond immediate distraction seems absurd, yet you find yourself mentally recording your stories, refining them, imagining them existing outside this place. Many Gulag survivors became writers after release, I mention. Solzhenitsyn is the most famous, but there were dozens of others. They developed their craft in the camps, telling stories to fellow prisoners, mentally composing when physical writing was impossible. The camps tried to silence voices, but ended up creating powerful ones instead. The final, most profound form of humanity you witness emerges from the most unlikely source, the dying. Men who know their end is near often show remarkable grace, concern for others, even forgiveness toward their captors. An old Estonian prisoner, wasting away from tuberculosis, spends his final days teaching young men his native folk songs, insisting this cultural knowledge must continue. A former Moscow professor distributes his few possessions thoughtfully, his extra socks to a young newcomer, his prized metal cup to a friend who shared his bread, his secret stash of tea leaves to the barracks elder who protected him from bullying. Most moving is the death of an elderly Ukrainian farmer who calls your small circle to his bunk one evening. "I'm going soon," he says matter-of-factly. "Tonight, probably, I want witnesses." He proceeds to recite names, dozens of them, people from his village who died during the forced collectivization famine, neighbors arrested during the purges, fellow prisoners who perished in Vorkuta. Each name is spoken clearly, deliberately, a final testament to lives the Soviet system tried to erase. "Remember them," he urges. "If any of you survive, remember them." He dies before morning roll call. The guards remove his body unceremoniously, but that night your circle gathers and repeats the names he entrusted to you, a promise kept to a man who asked only for memory as his final request. "That's humanity," I say softly. Caring about legacy, about remembrance, about something beyond your own survival, even at the end, choosing to be more than what the camp reduced you to. As your second year in Vorkuta continues, these moments of connection and resistance become increasingly important. The physical hardships remain overwhelming, the hunger, the cold, the exhaustion, the illness, but these small assertions of humanity provide something the Soviet system never intended, meaning amid suffering, dignity amid degradation. "We can't beat them," Taras acknowledges one night as your circle shares a rare treat, a small piece of sausage from Pavel's care package. "We'll never overpower the guards, never escape this place. Most of us won't survive our sentences. So why resist at all?" you ask. "Why bother with any of this?" Mikhail answers after a thoughtful silence. Because the purpose of this place isn't just to extract our labor before we die, it's to prove that humans are nothing but animals, that under enough pressure we'll abandon all dignity, all morality, all connection, that their vision of humanity is correct. And it isn't, Rain adds simply. Oh no, Mikhail agrees. It isn't. So every time we share bread or tell stories or help the sick or create beauty, we're proving them wrong, and that matters whether we survive or not. You consider this as you all sit in companionable silence, the small piece of sausage long gone, but the taste of it and the sharing of it lingering. Perhaps, you think, this is the truest form of resistance available in Vorkuta, not grand gestures of defiance, not escape attempts doomed to failure, but the daily, quiet insistence on remaining human in a place designed to destroy humanity. A small victory, but a real one. In early March 1953, a whisper passes through Vorkuta like a ghost. Stalin is ill. Nobody knows the source of this information. Nobody dares ask the guards directly. But the rumour spreads from barracks to barracks, mine to mine, carrying with it something prisoners have learned to live without: hope. Can it be true? Rain asks during a rare rest moment in the mine tunnels, voice barely audible over the distant clanking of carts. Don't, Taurus warns, glancing around for informers. Don't even think it, but everyone is thinking it. The possibility of Stalin's death hangs in the air, unspoken but omnipresent. For most prisoners, Stalin is not just a man, but the embodiment of the system that imprisoned them. His death would mean what? Nobody knows exactly, but change seems inevitable. This period was fascinating, I explained quietly. The prisoners had better information networks than you'd imagine. Somehow, news of Stalin's illness reached Vorkuta almost as soon as it happened, passing through this elaborate underground grapevine. On March 5th, the official announcement comes. The camp administrators gather all prisoners in the central yard. The political officer reads a statement in a flat voice. Joseph Stalin, leader of the Soviet people, has died. A moment of silence is ordered. You stand in formation, head bowed, thoughts racing. Around you, men maintain carefully blank expressions. To show grief would be hypocrisy. To show joy would be suicide. But beneath this manufactured stillness, you sense a current of electricity running through the assembled prisoners, a collective intake of breath, a shift in possibility. That night, the barracks buzz with whispered conversations. What will happen now? Will there be amnesty, changes in the camp system, a new direction for the Soviet Union itself? It's too early to hope, Mikhail cautions. Stalin is dead, but the system remains. Whoever takes control next might be just as brutal. But hope, once awakened, proves difficult to suppress. Over the following weeks, subtle changes appear. Guards seem less confident, looking to each other for cues. Camp administrators hold frequent meetings behind closed doors. Rumours spread of power struggles in Moscow, of factions fighting for control of the party apparatus. When dictators die, there's always a period of uncertainty, I note. The whole system depends on one person's will. Remove that person, and suddenly everyone's scrambling to figure out what happens next. In April, the first concrete change arrives, a general amnesty decree signed by the new Soviet leadership. For a brief, intoxicating moment, prisoners believe they might all go home. Then the details emerge. The amnesty applies primarily to common criminals with sentences under 5 years, pregnant women, and those with young children. Political prisoners, those convicted under Article 58 for counter-revolutionary activities, are explicitly excluded. The disappointment is crushing. Worse, it creates divisions among prisoners. Those few eligible for release pack their meager possessions with barely concealed excitement. Those left behind watch with resentment, abandoned to continued suffering. It's deliberate, Mikhail observes bitterly. They're separating us, weakening prisoner solidarity. The criminals go free while the politicals remain. Classic divide and conquer. May brings the arrival of new prisoners, but these are different from previous transports. They're primarily Ukrainians, recently arrested for nationalist activities. Unlike the broken men who typically arrive at Vorkuta, these newcomers seem defiant, unbroken by the system. They haven't been in the camps long enough to lose hope, Taras explains, himself Ukrainian. And they bring news from outside, real news about what's happening in Moscow. According to these new arrivals, Lavrenti Beria, head of the secret police and architect of much of the Gulag system, has been consolidating power since Stalin's death, but his position isn't secure. There are whispers of reforms, of potential changes to the camp system, of power struggles within the Kremlin. The Ukrainian prisoners were crucial to what happened next, I point out. They hadn't been in the system long enough to be beaten down by it. They still had the energy and will to resist, and they brought crucial information from the outside world. June passes with growing tension. The administration seems increasingly nervous, implementing stricter discipline while simultaneously making small concessions, slightly better food, less brutal work assignments, fewer punishments for minor infractions. It's as if they're trying to prevent trouble by alternating between carrot and stick. In late June, another bombshell. News spreads that Beria has been arrested in Moscow, charged with treason and criminal anti-state activities. The very man who oversaw the imprisonment of millions is now himself imprisoned. The irony is not lost on the camp population. If Beria can fall, anyone can, a prisoner comments during mealtime. The whole system could be changing. Guards respond to such talk with harsh punishments, but can't stem the tide of whispers, the growing sense that something fundamental has shifted in the power structure governing their lives. The thing about totalitarian systems, I observe, is that they depend on the illusion of permanence. Once cracks appear, once people start questioning whether the system is truly unassailable, resistance becomes conceivable. By early July, tension in the camp reaches unprecedented levels. The administration increases guards at key points, random barracks searches become more frequent, suspected troublemakers are isolated in punishment cells, but these measures only confirm what prisoners already sense. The authorities are afraid. The first organised resistance begins not in your sector, but in Mine 7, where conditions are particularly brutal. Workers simply refuse to descend into the shafts one morning. They don't shout, don't make demands, just stand silently at roll call, refusing to move toward the mine entrance. The guards are initially baffled by this passive resistance. They shout, threaten punishment, finally bring in the camp administrator. Negotiations begin. By afternoon, the Mine 7 prisoners return to work, but only after receiving promises of reduced quotas and better food. It worked, spreads through the camp that evening. They actually listened. The success, however small, ignites something. If concessions could be won through peaceful resistance at Mine 7, why not elsewhere? Discussions begin in hushed tones throughout the camp, careful, tentative, but with growing purpose. Your own barracks becomes one node in an expanding network. Mikhail, respected for his intelligence and fairness, is approached by representatives from other sectors. Plans are discussed, proposals debated. The goal isn't escape or violent uprising, both considered suicide, but a coordinated work stoppage to demand improved conditions. The most amazing thing about the Vorkuta uprising, I explain, was how organized it was. In a place where prisoners were kept deliberately isolated, where informants were everywhere, they still managed to coordinate across different mines and camp sectors. It was an extraordinary feat. Your small circle becomes deeply involved. Taras, with his connections among Ukrainian prisoners, serves as liaison to the new arrivals. Rain, who works occasionally as a clerk, has access to administrative areas where he can gather information. Pavel's workshop becomes a meeting point where representatives from different barracks can gather without suspicion. You find yourself acting as a messenger, carrying coded communications between sectors during work assignments. The responsibility terrifies you. Discovery would mean the punishment cells at minimum, possibly execution, but also fills you with purpose beyond mere survival. We might die anyway, you reason during a moment of doubt. At least this way it means something. Mid-July brings the first coordinated action. 3 mine brigades simultaneously refuse their morning assignments. Again, the resistance is passive. No violence, no shouting, just silent refusal. The demands are modest. Better food, reduced quotas, improved medical care, the right to write more than 2 letters per year to family. The administration responds with a mixed approach: isolation of perceived leaders, promises of consideration for the demands, threats of severe punishment if work doesn't resume immediately. After tense negotiations, the strikers return to their assignments, having secured only vague assurances. But something has changed. The prisoners have discovered a power they didn't know they possessed: collective action. The administration has revealed its uncertainty, its willingness to negotiate rather than immediately resort to force. What's happening in Vorkuta is unprecedented, Mikhail explains during a secret meeting of representatives. This isn't just about food or letters. We're challenging the foundation of the camp system, the idea that prisoners have no rights, no voice, no humanity. The planning grows more ambitious. Rather than isolated actions by individual brigades, the discussion turns to camp-wide coordination. Representatives from all mine sectors meet in shifting locations: the bathhouse, the repair workshops, even the camp infirmary where sympathetic medical staff provide cover. The date is set, July 19th. The action will begin in Mine 3, then spread across all sectors if the initial response is not immediately violent. The demands expand beyond immediate conditions to include political concerns, review of Article 58 convictions, transfer of political prisoners to regular prisons with defined sentences, the right to actual correspondence with family members. We're not asking to be released, Mikhail clarifies during a final planning meeting. We're asking to be treated as human beings with basic rights. Nothing more, nothing less. The night before the planned action, tension in the barracks is palpable. Men check and recheck the hidden supplies they've been accumulating. Extra bread, saved tobacco, medicines stolen from the infirmary. No one expects violence from their side, but the administration's response remains unpredictable. Try to sleep, Taras advises as lights out approaches. Tomorrow will be long, whatever happens. But sleep eludes most of you. The immensity of what you're planning, open defiance of a system designed to crush all resistance, weighs heavily. Many write letters to family members to be passed on if the worst occurs. July 19th dawns grey and cool, typical Vorkuta summer weather. Morning roll call proceeds normally, betraying nothing of what's to come. Men march to their work assignments as they have thousands of times before. At precisely 10:30 a.m, the action begins. In Mine 3, workers lay down their tools and assemble in the main shaft. Their brigade leaders present a document to the foreman, a list of demands signed by all workers. When he refuses to accept it, they sit down, refusing to continue work, until camp administrators address their concerns. Word spreads quickly through the camp's underground communication network. By noon, 4 more mine brigades have joined the action. By evening, nearly half the camp's workforce is participating in what is now openly called a strike, a word previously unthinkable in the context of the Gulag. The initial response was confusion, I note. The camp system wasn't designed to handle organised resistance. Guards and administrators had protocols for dealing with individual troublemakers, even small groups, but hundreds of prisoners acting in concert. They had no playbook for that. The first night of the strike passes without violence. The administration attempts to isolate the action by restricting movement between camp sectors, but the strike has already spread too widely. Representatives from different mines manage to meet despite increased security, coordinating their approach for the next day. By morning, the strike has grown to include over 15,000 prisoners across multiple camp sectors. Work has halted completely in 7 mines. Economic pressure mounts, coal shipments to Moscow and other industrial centres have stopped entirely from Vorkuta, one of the Soviet Union's primary sources. The administration shifts strategy, sending political officers to address gathered strikers. They promise consideration of demands, urge return to work, remind prisoners of potential consequences for their actions. These appeals fall on deaf ears. After years of broken promises, words alone hold no weight. "We require official representatives from Moscow" becomes the unified response across all striking sectors. "We will negotiate only with those who have actual authority to implement changes." Days pass in tense standoff. The administration attempts to drive wedges between different prisoner groups, offering concessions to common criminals if they return to work, threatening political prisoners with transfer to even harsher camps, trying to isolate Ukrainian nationalists as the supposed instigators. These tactics achieve limited success. Some prisoners do return to work, but the core of the strike remains solid. The sense of solidarity transcends national, religious, and criminal political divisions. For perhaps the first time in Vorkuta's history, prisoners act as a unified force. The strike committee created this amazing structure, I explain. They had representatives from each barracks reporting to sector committees who reported to a central coordinating group. They maintained discipline, prevented violence, and kept everyone unified around core demands. It was an extraordinary feat of organisation under impossible circumstances. Your own role continues as messenger between sectors. You witness firsthand the growing confidence among strikers, the increasing nervousness of guards, the frantic meetings of camp administrators. Something truly unprecedented is happening, and no one on either side knows how it will end. A week into the strike, Moscow finally responds. Officials arrive by plane, escorted directly to the camp administration building. Negotiations begin with selected prisoner representatives, older, respected men chosen for their ability to articulate demands clearly and maintain calm. The central demand has evolved into something more fundamental than better conditions. Political prisoners want recognition as prisoners of conscience rather than criminals, with all the rights that distinction implies under Soviet law. "We are not asking for freedom," one representative explains to the Moscow delegation. "We are asking for justice within your own system." The negotiations continue for days, with information filtering back to the general population through the strike committee's communication network. Small concessions are offered: improved food, more liberal correspondence rights, reduced work quotas. But on the central demand, the political status of prisoners, Moscow remains unmoved. The system couldn't grant that core demand, I note. Acknowledging political prisoners as anything other than criminals would undermine the entire ideological foundation of the Gulag. It would mean admitting the Soviet state imprisoned people for their thoughts, not their actions. As negotiations stall, tension rises. Guards receive reinforcements from military units stationed near Vorkuta. Rumors spread of deadlines, ultimatums, possible forcible suppression of the strike. Yet prisoners maintain their peaceful resistance, understanding that violence would provide the perfect excuse for massacre. "We've come too far to turn back," Mikhail tells your barracks one evening, returning from a meeting with the strike committee. "But we've also come too far to throw away our lives needlessly. Whatever happens, remember we've accomplished something extraordinary just by standing together." 2 weeks into the strike, on August 1st, the administration's patience finally ends. Military units surround Mine 29, where the most determined strikers have gathered. An ultimatum is delivered: return to work immediately or face consequences. The strikers refuse. They link arms, forming a human chain around the mine entrance. They sing nationalist songs, religious hymns, revolutionary anthems. They stand, unarmed, as armed soldiers take positions around them. What happens next will be disputed for decades, witnesses giving conflicting accounts. Some say a prisoner made a threatening move. Others claim the soldiers fired without provocation. All agree on the outcome: automatic weapons opened fire on the unarmed strikers. The sound of gunfire echoes across the camp. From your position near Mine 7, you can't see what's happening, but the sudden silence following the shots tells its own story. By evening, word spreads of the casualties. Dozens dead, perhaps 60 or more, with hundreds wounded. The exact numbers will never be confirmed. Bodies are removed quickly, buried in unmarked graves beyond the camp perimeter. The wounded receive minimal treatment, many dying of their injuries in the following days. The massacre breaks the strike. Faced with the administration's willingness to use lethal force, most prisoners return to work over the next 48 hours. The remaining holdouts are transferred to punishment cells or shipped to other camps. By August 3rd, Vorkuta's mines are operational again, though working at reduced capacity. In the official Soviet records, the Vorkuta uprising barely existed, I say softly. They called it labor discipline issues or temporary work stoppages. The deaths went unrecorded. It wasn't until decades later that survivors could tell what really happened. The aftermath brings both repression and reform. Strike leaders who can be identified disappear into punishment cells or distant camps, but some demands are quietly implemented. Slightly better food, more correspondence rights, reduced quotas, even limited camp visits for some prisoners' families. They had to give something, Taras observes bitterly. Otherwise, it would happen again. Your small circle survives the crackdown intact, having been careful to remain useful messengers rather than visible leaders. But the experience changes you all. There's a new understanding of both possibility and limitation, of what can be achieved through solidarity, and what price will be paid for pushing too far. "We didn't win," Mikhail acknowledges during a rare private conversation. "But we weren't defeated either. We proved something to ourselves, to the administration, maybe even to Moscow. What did we prove, you ask? That we're still human, that no matter what they do to us, they can't take that away. Not completely." The weeks following the strike bring subtle shifts. Guards seem slightly less arbitrary in their punishments. Food improves marginally. The administration demonstrates a new awareness that prisoners aren't simply passive victims, but potential actors with their own agency. The uprising wasn't a failure, I explain. It was part of a process that eventually led to the dismantling of the entire Gulag system. Not immediately, not completely, but the cracks had appeared. The myth of absolute control was broken. For you personally, the strike marks a transition. You're no longer just surviving Vorkuta, you're bearing witness. The stories you tell in evening barracks, once simple distractions, now include accounts of resistance, of solidarity, of human dignity maintained against impossible odds. Remember the faces, an old prisoner tells you when he learns of your storytelling role. Remember the names. If you survive, tell people what happened here, not just the suffering, but the courage. You promise him you will, and in making that promise, you find something unexpected, a purpose beyond endurance, a reason to continue that transcends mere survival. Summer fades toward autumn, work continues in the mines, the daily struggle against cold, hunger, and exhaustion resumes its familiar rhythm. But something has changed, not in the physical reality of Vorkuta, but in the consciousness of those imprisoned there. The possibility of resistance, once demonstrated, cannot be unlearned. The experience of solidarity, however briefly achieved, remains a touchstone. The knowledge that prisoners are not simply isolated victims, but a potential community with shared interests lingers beneath the surface of daily interactions. The most powerful outcome wasn't the concessions they won, I reflect. It was the psychological shift. Once people believe change is possible, their relationship with authority fundamentally changes. Fear loses some of its power. As winter approaches again, bringing its familiar threats of increased cold and darkness, you find yourself facing it differently than the previous year. Not with more optimism, perhaps, but with a deeper sense of connection to those facing it alongside you. The strike has revealed Vorkuta not just as a place of isolation and suffering, but as a community capable of collective action, of solidarity in the face of oppression. That knowledge doesn't make the cold any less bitter or the labor any less grueling, but it provides a context beyond individual survival. You are part of something, however brutal the conditions, however uncertain the future. That belonging offers a kind of strength unavailable to the isolated prisoner. And in that strength there is the faint but unmistakable glimmer of hope.